My name is Joseph Richberg, Senior Data Architect at Penguin Random House. On today's Azure tutorials, we're going to discuss how to implement a Delta process using Azure pipelines and Azure tables. Let's begin. Here we are in our pipeline. It's very simple. There are four activities, 2 lookup activities, the actual copy, and then the activity which manages the start point information. So when you're doing deltas, you need to keep track of where you left off. And in this pipeline, we do it in an Azure table. So the table is right here. It has one column we're interested in called the last record date. It's not the last time the process ran. It's the maximum date in the table, the last record that changed when this program ran. So the last time this process ran, if we looked in the source table, which is an Oracle table in an on-prem system, and I said, what was the latest date of any record? That was the date. So that's the point at which we ran. 17th of November. Today's the 26th of November, so a lot of days have passed. So in theory, in this case, 9 days would have passed. So if this process were to run again, this is only a demo process, but if this process were to run again, it would go out to that source table and say, the last record I pulled had this record date. Now give me every record that's older than this, but less than or equal to the current time I'm in. Okay? And that'll become a little clearer. So the important thing to focus on this is the column I need. Now there's partition, row key, timestamp. If you're unfamiliar with Azure tables, do me a favor, go to the comments and say, hey Joe, can you do a video on Azure tables? While you're down there, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe buttons. That way I can produce more content and you guys will get notified as soon as it's up. So back to the table. Again, I'm interested in this column, the last record date. So how do I collect that from? A start point activity. It's kind of simple. So I set my data source to the table and the query is really simple. The partition key must equal this value, extracts, and the row key must equal this value, hash extract. And I only want the first row. In theory, there is only one row, but we want the first row. So given extracts and hash extract, I will get this column. So that's my starting point. Now, my end point. You always want to make sure that your process is at 2 points in time. You don't want to open-end this. So you don't want to say, give me everything greater than my point that I start. Because when you do a SQL select, the select result set is at that point in time. So here's an example. I select from a table. And at the point I select, there are 100 records in the table. Okay. And that select statement is running. I'm collecting data. And before the select statement finishes, 10 more records were added to the table. Now, when the select statement finishes, it will say, here are your 100 records. If I select count from the table, it'll say 110. And the reason is the select statement is a point in time. When you ask for the data, the system will give you what's in the table. But it won't continuously add records as those records are being added. It ignores them because it's a snapshot. So we have to simulate that. And the easiest way to simulate that with a delta is to, at the point you're running your process, go to the table and say, what is the maximum date right now? So if we look at that, what I'm asking for is a max of a column called modified. And I'm going to change that to be the last record date. That's the new column name. Now, modified, it's kind of weird. That's actually the column name. This is an Oracle table, and we went to the DBAs and we said, we're doing deltas on this table. Can you give us a column that has a date stamp whenever the record is modified? And they said, we happen to have a column and it's called modified. So don't get hung up on this specific query. This will be unique to your delta process. Just keep in mind what you want is you want to get an endpoint. So when this process runs, it runs and says, at the moment I'm running, give me the max date give me the record with the highest date, the maximum date. So when this runs, if this should run at, say, noon on any given day, then anything added with a modified date after 12 p.m. will be added to the table, but the system won't care, and I can pick it up going forward, right? And I'll show you that in a second. So I say, when did I start? When am I going to end? Now, I need to create a SQL statement. So that's how this works. I create this SQL statement. So I get a start point and an end point, and then I fabricate a select statement that becomes my copy. And the select statement is a dynamic content, and basically it says select this column from that database and that table where modified is greater than the last record date from the start point activity, output first row, and modified is less than or equal to the endpoint last record date. So I'll show you what this looks like here. This is what it comes out to look like, right? Select MD5 hash from this table where modified greater than, and then this date here is pulled from the table. So let's do this. Okay, 11/17. So we'll do 11/17, and it would be blah, 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 extra time. And modified is less than or equal to, and today is do 11, do 19, 2019. Okay. So this, and there would be time over here. So we'll just do 12, or we'll do this 00:00 for midnight. Okay. So when this statement runs, it's going to grab all of the records in this table between these two pieces of time, these two pieces of data, right? Between 11/17 and 11/19. Okay. Now, that's the point in time snapshot. So it starts rolling through and it will move data. When that's done, what it then has to do is it has to actually record that data, that time. So you can't just insert records into a copy activity, right? You can't do a derived column. Wish you could. It would be so much nicer, but you can't. So you have to make up a fake select statement to pull data from a source and put it into the table, right? Because what we have to do is we basically have to modify this table and change this record date, and that record date would be changed to this, because that's the last time I ran. So what happens is you have to kind of fudge it. And what you do is your source is this. Select max modified as last record date, and then I have this extra column here, hash extract as row key, from that table where modified equals that same lookup. And it kind of looks like this. There's the concat, and it comes out to be this. Select max modified as last record date, and then hash extract as row key from public master contacts, where modified equals, and it's not max modified, it's modified equals, and it would be this, right? Which is the same as we talked about, it'd be 11/19, 2019, right? And basically we want to force that in. So how do we do that? By creating this fake select statement. It will go back out to our Oracle system. It'll pull this where it equals this, right? So I basically need to force it to give me a select statement. I guess in theory I could just fake it out and just do, I could just fake it out and do something like this. But I don't know how that would work without a source, right? Yeah, I couldn't. I need to have a source. So I do that. And in essence, what that does is it pushes this record. Now you're asking, well, what is this weird hash extract as row key? So when you're pushing into a table, into an Azure table, there are some pieces of information that have to be either supplied by you or assumed by the object. So let's show you what that means. Sync. So sync's type is the Azure table. Same table here. insert type is merge, right? It's either merge or replace. I guess we could have done a replace because I'm updating it, but I did a merge. Partition key value, right? So your choices, right? The partition key value can be a fixed value, or it can take value from the sink or source. We're going to specify a partition value, and we want extracts because I want this row. There's my partition key. I know exactly which one it is. So that's why it's partition. Row key value selection. So if you look, the row key can be auto-generated unique or can take value from sink or source. So we're going to use a sink column, right, where it's going. And the column, the row key column, is row key. So what we're doing is we're basically here mapping row key to row key, last record date to last record date. And that's how we map it. And then this will push it through. So again, the row key column is row key. The default partition is extracts. And the specific partition key value, extracts. Row key value is coming from the source. Actually, it's used sync column. Right, it's sync column. And that sync column is actually here, row key. And so that's why we do that, right? This row key matches up to that row key. So if we look at the source, there's the row key. So when I say here's hash extract, what this is really doing here is saying, well, find it here. And it finds it and puts the record date. So that's kind of it. Again, hopefully I didn't go too fast, but that's how you manage it. So what'll happen next time this runs is it'll look up and it'll look up in the table what was my last value, and the last value should correspond to the max value you pulled here. And again, remember, you've got to pull your endpoint at the same time you start so you have a finite point in time. And that allows for systems which have updates, sometimes thousands of updates per second, to persist, and you won't miss any. If you don't do your endpoint here, like I said, and you do your endpoint somewhere else, you have a chance of missing records because of the time for this. So if 10 records are entered in the time it takes to do your copy, and you don't grab your endpoint here, you'll miss those. So, and that also means, remember, it's important that it's greater than and less than or equal to. Let me go over that. So I always want to be greater than the last time and less than or equal to this time. Now, you may be thinking, why not greater than or equal to, right? Because that's more efficient for an index. And you're right. Because here's the problem. I don't know the granularity of that column. And I really don't care about the granularity of that column. And what I mean is, if it's milliseconds, and just for instance, we do 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and it's, I think, what, 0.375, right? That means I would have to add a millisecond and make this 376 for the next time, right? Greater than or equal to 376. And if this was 376, I'd have to add a millisecond, or I'd have to add a second. And you don't want to start guessing and adding time to this. So it's always easier to say, just have to be greater than the last time I ran. And the system will know what that means. And you do less than or equal to, which guarantees you pick up that last record. Because if you just did less than, you would miss this record. It has to be less than this. And you'd have these weird little gaps. So remember, it's always greater than to start and less than or equal to at the end. So hopefully this was helpful and you can use this somewhere. Again, please like and subscribe in the comments if I missed something or you need more explanation. Leave a comment below. I'll do my best to answer them, and I'll also do my best to get more videos out in a faster fashion. Thanks.